In this upcoming episode of DoubleDM, we will discuss traveling in tabletop roleplaying. We will touch on how travel isn't just the connection between interesting points, but just as much part of the narrative and game you play. We talk about how you can use travel to encourage roleplay in your players, and how you can showcase and world build your world using travel as a tool. While we're on the topic of world building, Why Your World Matters is finally out on all podcasting feeds and should appear right next to the episode you are listening to right now. So why not download that one too and check it out later. It has some great guests from the community and features awesome discussions around creative writing. In other news, Niels and I want to thank you all for 4,800 Twitter followers and also 4,000 plays on our little podcasting project. This has been an amazing journey for us, and it's only been possible thanks to every single one of you. As said previously, 5,000 followers on Twitter will mark a special milestone, and there are surprises to come. But for now, let's move on to the episode. Hello and welcome people to the next episode of DoubleDM, episode 62. Niels, my lovely co-host, how are you doing today?
I can't complain, really. It has not been the best of days, but it has been good so far.
Good so far. Okay.
I'm not looking forward to working in retail today because we are nearing Easter, and that's...
Oh, that's a...
Yeah, that's
so,
like
so I have to ask,
shit.
for retail work, Christmas is obviously the worst time of the year, right?
Yeah, don't get me started. Christmas is just crazy.
Especially here in Germany, Easter is probably very big. The US doesn't have really much on Easter, at least in comparison to Germany. But is Easter or Halloween the second worst time of the year?
Easter, by far. No question about it.
Okay.
There isn't really anything about Halloween in retail, at least here. Not that much, at least. Because when you would usually get Halloween stuff, there is already stuff for Christmas, and people are going crazy. So yeah, Easter by a lot. And
I think if we look at I don't know where I've heard that, but for the country of Germany, Easter is more important than Christmas.
Yeah.
As a holiday.
I think for most of Central Europe, actually, it is regarded as the most important holiday. So yeah, regarding that, people go batshit crazy. And especially nowadays, with all the shit that is going on, people are hoarding oil and flour again. So yeah, that is still going on. And now that we are nearing Easter, the eggs are being hoarded as well.
The eggs.
Don't ask me why, but people buy, I think I sold once 4 to 5 cartons of 10 packs of eggs.
I mean, when I was a kid, right, I'm more or less Christian. I was raised on Christian values. I am not really going to church or in the church anymore, but I obviously went to church with my family for Easter and Christmas. At least in my church at that time, there was always this big Easter hunt for the children, and they had easily hidden 200 eggs around the church grounds. So I can definitely understand maybe that person that bought the eggs was someone that had some of these events organized and had to buy that many eggs to hide them even.
Yeah, it is totally understandable, but it's still a lot, because even when we buy like 3 pallets full of egg, they're just gone within 2 or 3 days. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even like eggs that much at least.
I mean, you can do some awesome stuff with eggs.
I mean, eggs are probably the most versatile food you can have in your fridge or in your kitchen.
Yeah, because you can eat them breakfast, evening, food, midday,
you can
lunch.
just use them for everything, really.
Exactly.
But still, an egg alone isn't all that interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on from eggs. Niels, you had a Curse of Strahd session this week.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well, we went to the town of Vallaki and heard about some missing children and some sacred bones being not there anymore. So we are trying to investigate where they went, because we took on a assignment to safely or protect an NPC which wanted to go to the church where there was sacred or holy ground for being protected against Strahd. But the ground isn't holy anymore. So
because the bones went missing.
Exactly.
Let's just hope that the bones didn't go away.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah, but in the process of figuring out where these bones went, or if they went anywhere, or whatever happened to them, we went to the orphanage and found out that 6 children are missing, plus 1 child has died a couple of days ago. Talked around and found the cause for that, hopefully. Let's say hopefully.
And what cause is that?
That would be a shadow demon possessing one of the children.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we fought that shit, and it was an awesome fight, but I rolled terrible. I got advantage nearly every single roll, and I got in 3 rounds, I got 5 nat 1s. That's shit, because all I can do as a fighter is attack, and if I miss that, I'm useless. But yeah, that was most of the session, and then now we are trying to find out where the bones went, because we got a hint for that. We got a name, and yeah, and a new player was introduced. She took over the role of one of the NPCs, I think, and is now part of the player group, playing a blood hunter, demon hunting person under the tutelage of Van Richten. And once this name was dropped, I wasn't in the room when this name was dropped, and my character wouldn't know about him, but I did. And I thought, oh, wait, when Van Richten is here, why is Strahd still alive? Why? But yeah, so there's some mystery to be had, some things to figure out, some people to save, some vampires to slay, and I'm excited. What about you? Any sessions for you?
Only coming up. Not yet anything happened. Friday, finally my DM cursed break gets broken. I hope, at least. Please. Friday we are hopefully gonna record Titan's Call with you. But currently, as of date of recording, which is Thursday before Friday, 2 of my players, also known as the 2 people that aren't in this episode of DoubleDM, are currently sick or kind of ill, and we don't know if we are able to record tomorrow. Obviously, health takes always priority.
Definitely.
So if they don't feel comfortable doing it tomorrow, we are not gonna do it. That means we need to find a different time. But also, finally, I get to play my Phantoms of Chaos game again on Sunday, and I hope that works out, because I've been excited for this group to come back together for so long. Because the session we had before this Sunday, was a long time ago, because we play 8 hours in person and said, okay, we do this like once a month or once every 2 months. And that's kind of the schedule we are working with. It makes it easier for the players that have to travel an hour to get to the place where we play. Easier because they don't have to have 2 hours of travel time for a 4-hour session, which I totally understand that they don't want to do that every week. So we do this more on this basis. But we had such a fun, good session. We didn't make any progress really, or not much progress. But my players were only traveling from start to finish. But we had a lot of fun because it was the simple stuff that we enjoyed. And I think it just showed me once again that TTRPGs are just as much about this grand epic, for example, combats or intrigues or plot twists or whatever, right? These epic moments that you have that make everyone feel ecstatic about the game. But at the same time, people become ecstatic about the game if it's just a simple conversation around a campfire, if it's just a secret being revealed that has nothing really of value to add to the current objective, but it's just a character moment, a heartfelt and sincere character moment.
Those heartfelt role-playing moments are the glue that keeps everything together, at least in my games it is. It is the glue that combines the epic and very intense moments to keep the tension at a level where no one breaks or the campaign falls apart. I
wouldn't actually say that, just because I think you say this as they are the glue that holds everything together. And you say that because it's a big bonding part of the game, and without it the game would fall apart. And I agree. But also at the same time, I don't like calling it just the glue that holds everything together, because it's just as much a big part of the game that needs to be held together with the others, right?
Yeah, it's more than that, yeah.
It's just a part of the game, and without it, something would be missing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we didn't have that for some time because my players had to unravel a mystery last 2 sessions before that, where they had a lot of, okay, we need to do this now, and we need to go to this person now and talk to them and ask these questions, and we need to go there and investigate over there. And they didn't have time to really sit down and appreciate how far they've come as characters as in the game already. And they had time for that on their travel. They had time for that in the tavern before they went into the mountains again. And at the same time, we had also some fun challenges and encounters, not combat encounters, but encounters with NPCs and the nature around them that made it very fun for them to still interact with the world. And I loved that. And there's gonna be a little bit of a break again in the next adventure coming, because they're now entering a dungeon crawl in quotation marks, because it's not a really dungeon crawl that will last for 6 sessions or something, but they're gonna enter the first room of this dungeon, this five room dungeon, which is this large valley, which is stuck in a time loop with 3 different Medusa. I checked what the actual plural word of Medusa is, and it's Medusa or Medusas. So they are encountering 3 different Medusa sisters that are protecting the dungeon, the actual dungeon that's in the mountains. And they need to convince them or kill them or get some way to open the door, right? These 3 Medusas hold the figurative key to this door. There isn't actually a really key that they need to get, but they can achieve the key by killing them, by befriending them, by helping them, by whatever they want to do to get to the key. It's gonna be a lot more, okay, what do you do again? You don't have a direction right now. You need to find something, but it's a confined area now. It's a really confined area in this valley. They can't get out anymore as soon as they enter. And I think with that, it allows them, it adds this mystery of this curse that's around them because they can't leave anymore. At the same time, it gives them the openness to explore and at some points, the downtime to maybe also take a step back and think again and sit around the campfire and talk because they have the time.
No, but I like those things. Every time I play, I always look forward to these not really plot relevant times where we just sit in a tavern around a campfire, talk with NPCs and with other characters, just let things pass that happened and talk about those and just have fun moments that you would have with your friends outside of the game. Sometimes you just enjoy sitting at a bar and talking about random bullshit. Your characters would usually do so as well. So I always like those.
I enjoy those moments a lot, and I hope that they get some of them. And obviously, I made all of the 3 Medusa very different from each other, so you can try different approaches with each of them. One of them is a little bit more feisty, you could say, angered and, combat heavy. One of them is cursed in some way and kind of crazy and kind of lost her mind. And the third one is just a loving person they have to find, but she's missing.
Interesting.
So every one of them has some sort of twist to them, some sort of interesting personality, and I just want to see how they interact before I give them this time. I don't want to give them any directions. I just want to let their impressions of what I present them reflect on how I use it to further the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I would like to hear about it because it sounds like some interesting stories to be told. Can be a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah. So with that, I think we can move on to this episode's main section. We will hear you all after a short break. If you like what you are hearing, then why not give us a follow on the platform you are listening to us right now? And why not also give us a 5-star rating and review on Spotify, iTunes, or any other platform you choose to listen to us. If you wish to book ad slots that play instead of this pre-recorded audio in the episode, contact us on Twitter about our current available advertisement plans and prices. And with that, back to the episode.
And with that, welcome back to the episode. Today we are talking about traveling. So, Emil, please tell me, what do we mean when we say traveling? How do we define it specifically in a TTRPG sense?
So, traveling is very easily defined because a lot of people know what it actually means. It's getting from point A to point B. The journey from point A to point B is traveling. So, in the TTRPG sense, that is still the same thing. There isn't really any change to that. It's getting from town A to town B. Getting from end of town to other end of town, getting from one continent to the other. All of these are traveling, right? But I think in a TTRPG sense, if we're kind of breaking down how people structure their games, it's getting from point A where something happens to point B where something happens. And travel being the bridge between those 2 points where players get to do something, where some action happens, where some problems are that players need to solve. And while that is certainly kind of true, you want them at point B, right? But they are at point A. So your players are at point A, but you want them at point B. So you need to get them to travel to point B. And that is an integral part of the story. They just don't show up there. In some way, shape, or form, they must have gotten there somehow. That can be by ship, by foot, by horseback, or by teleportation. That is also a means of travel. It's kind of the most uninteresting and most interesting way of travel at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
But I will get to that in a bit. But really, travel is just getting from point A to point B, and everything in between that is part of the traveling experience. Most of the time, people define travel also as being outdoors. And while that is certainly true, it doesn't have to be. I'm not saying you can travel inside a house or whatever, but I think what people mean with traveling is often that environments change and players need to work with that.
Yeah, it's kind of on a bigger scale than from your couch to your fridge.
Yeah, obviously, right?
That would just be walking 2 steps, basically.
For you, maybe.
I wouldn't consider this traveling per se.
Traveling is really where the intention is to change locations.
Yeah.
And now location isn't your couch, location is the city you are in.
Exactly.
And going from one city to another, that would be traveling to that other city. Niels, we talked a bit about now what kind of levels or magnitudes of travel are there. And I wanted to ask you, especially kind of how these may be just on surface level. What are your feelings about magnitudes of travel? At what point would you consider something a long travel, a short travel, a big travel? And kind of how does that single fact impact your traveling experience in TTRPGs?
Most of the time from one settlement to another, I wouldn't consider a long travel. That would be more or less a short-term thing. But for example, if you live your players are point A is in the north of the country and you want to go to the complete south, no matter how big the country actually is, in regards to your magnitude of play you are playing at, this would be considered a long travel. It kind of depends on how big your magnitude of play is at the moment. Because if you play on a continental scale, it is basically irrelevant to travel from one city to another, but more important to travel from one country to another. But if you play on a country level, it would be very significant to move from one city to the complete other side of that country. So this kind of defines what a long travel means, depending on what your magnitude of play is.
Yeah, I feel like travel kind of, right, as you said, is connected to the magnitude or the level of the campaign, the scale of it all.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you need to realize. If you have an urban setting or just a single city, the whole adventure is in, or just really the few, maybe 30 kilometers around that city, then traveling in that city is already the traveling experience in your game. And since we are often D&D related, right? People always, with DoubleDM, we kind of are assigned with D&D, kind of, right? But we're often system agnostic. But there are still 3 pillars in D&D that are often talked about, which are combat, social interactions or roleplay, and exploration. And exploration is the 3rd pillar that is kind of neglected by the game and by people too. And it plays into this travel experience. The travel experience is about exploration, about seeing new places, about going to new places, about wandering through new places to get to other places, maybe.
Yeah.
And there your campaign scale comes into play. If your campaign scale is one country, then you're probably not going to change a lot about the environment when it comes to, for example, climate zones.
Yeah.
It's always going to be the same. You're maybe not going to change a lot about cultural differences because it's one country. Obviously, you can have very, 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 very large country that has a lot of different cultures in it. But generally, most countries are one culture.
Yeah.
And with travel, you can showcase. That's kind of what travel can be used for. Showcasing different environments, showcasing different people, different cultures, different societies. And if your campaign is on a smaller scale, you need to change up what you show with your travel. Because if your travel is just, okay, get from point A to point B, it isn't interesting. And that's okay. It's okay to not have interesting travel. But you could make it interesting by showcasing your world.
Yeah, it kind of can be used for or basically an introduction to your world or into the setting itself, introducing them to the culture that is most present at this point in space.
Yeah.
Or the weather conditions that usually come into play.
The geography, the everything, right? Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a tool for you to use to introduce your players or get your players used to the world they are playing in this campaign.
Yeah. You kind of visit all of these different places in succession, right? For example, my players traveled recently in one of our games across the country, just one country. And I planned for them to later travel further distances. But since they're still kind of locally bound by their own wishes, what they want to do, they only realize that one country, but that one country is in distress. There's an uprising of bandit and revolutionaries at the moment, and people are in fear. But a lot of people react differently to that. And they traveled through the country, away from the capital city where the roads were still basically shining. People were happy and glad about the country because they were safe. But as they got more into the countryside, it became much more of people being scared of foreigners, especially because there are bandits roaming around. 3 merchants have been attacked in the last week. The players could have been another group of bandits, another group of pillagers or plunderers or whatever. People became a little bit skeptical. Now, my players handled that very well because they interacted with the people. They reassured them. They gave them maybe hope as well. They told them stories of how the army is currently probably battling one of the outposts. My players found that outpost and gave the information to the army and then said, cool, we can go somewhere else. Doesn't matter. But my players had a chance to interact with my world, had the chance to interact with the people they met on their travels. And that's how travel becomes more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes way more of a tool for world building. And definitely. I want to go into that tool for world building a bit with you, Niels. Because when you visit all these different places in quick succession, it can be just different towns and villages on the way to a different town, or it can be different countries, or can be different provinces or whatever, right? But how do you use that for world building?
Depending on what you have in mind for a specific country, it shows the players and yourself what the infrastructure in that country might be. If of every settlement is kind of connected by paved roads, it has a different approach to trade and commerce than maybe just some dirt roads or some paths that lead to minor settlements. Yeah. This might be a huge thing that can be shaped by the players as well. While you are playing, it might lead to some trade routes opening up. And then the need for better roads comes along with that. And then you can use that to shape the world. Yeah. This is one huge thing that can come from travel, or some ideas that might be settled upon traveling.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing of the road travel, right? But generally travel opens up connections, right? You connect to different people and to different places. And I think in that connecting, there lies the beauty of traveling for world building or whatever. And it allows you to showcase different parts of your world in quick succession, maybe, right? If your players are traveling from village to village and the current situation in that country is that there are a lot of bandits roaming around, as in mine, you can showcase a lot of different reactions to those bandits. Maybe some people are just scared and don't want to take the players into their village and force them to stay outside and sleep in a camp outside town. Others might have barricaded their homes and built a wall around their village to protect themselves. Others might have just fled their own village to the big cities to get safe, because those are not attacked. But the small villages, obviously without protection, are attacked, and that allows you to showcase a lot of different reactions to certain problems or to different things or whatever, right? And that gives you a lot of opportunity to showcase your world, showcase the struggles, and give your players a connection to that struggle, to the people, to the world.
Yeah, and not just showcases it, but when you're building some sort of travel into your campaign, it forces you to think, how would the people travel? It forces you to think about different kind of things when in comparison to just creating dungeons or some settlements in general. But the connection between those settlements needs to be thought about when you plan to travel somehow.
Yeah, I mean, and also, right, when you plan the travel now I'm saying this like I'm judging others for not doing it this way. I definitely am not. If you don't like traveling, which is understandable, then don't use this. But if you want your traveling to be interesting and maybe intriguing to your players into getting to know your world, definitely do it this way. Do it to, okay, my players arrive at this village, or say, okay, there's a village on the way my players are gonna take. What's happening in this village? It can be a very short description. It can be 5 minutes or even less, way less, 2 minutes of narration from you about how this village looks. And that alone can give you a lot of world building points, and that you can draw and then use for different games. So if you prepare travel, it can help you a lot in world building because you showcase a lot of your world, but also it allows your players to influence the world building, right? Not just by being there as characters, but when you're traveling, it's totally fine to say, okay, there's a village now. Why don't you guys tell me how this looks, right? Some people don't like that. Some people don't like it when their players take narration and basically do whatever they want with something like this village. And that's okay. Some people very much enjoy that. I, for one, like it when my players sometimes take over narration from me.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I don't like it. Sometimes there's moments where I really want my feeling I prepared and thought of to come across. Sometimes they can make their own, because that's very cool if they do so. And with traveling, where most of these places are rather insignificant to the story and to the game, that's very great for them to take over narration and influence your world with the wishes they have. If one of the players is a cleric and says, hey DM, can this town have a specific shrine to my god? Or I want to build one in this town. Or whatever. Let them do that, because that gives them a very deep connection to the mundane in your world, to the insignificant in quotation marks in your world.
Oh yeah, and that's one thing I like to do to make my travel sessions or travel encounters more interesting, or at least I'm trying this sort of thing for now, making travel a sort of improv or roleplay opportunity to develop your characters.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes just describe the terrain and where they want to go and how long it may take. And then I just pick one player at random and ask them, what kind of challenge did you meet on your way there? And then the group as a whole decides how they dealt with that. And then this helps you world build and gives your players opportunities to develop their characters and have fun and influence the world they are in actively. Coming back to player agency. So
yeah. Now, it wouldn't be a travel episode without mentioning Campfire by Abyssal Brews. I don't know if Matt is listening or Fernando is listening. You guys did an awesome job. And if people are interested and haven't heard of Campfire yet, which are maybe like 5 people in the world, go check it out. It's a very great travel expansion for 5e. It's skill challenge based. It's very elegant. It takes traveling from one place to another in 15 minutes and allows your players for a lot of roleplay opportunities to develop their characters, like Niels said, to develop the world and to have meaningful impact in travel as well. Because sometimes even I catch myself in my rather intriguing way of my players exploring the world and finding new information about how mundane people deal with the current situation at hand that is presented in the country. Sometimes still doesn't make travel impactful. My players gain new information and new knowledge of the world, but it isn't impactful. It's just, okay, cool, this is happening. Now let's move on. And Matt and Fernando made a good system that has an impactful mechanic where if you fail the traveling, then you get a hardship. And if you succeed, you get a windfall. And those things are impactful boons and things you get. One of them was, for example, my players and I used Campfire, for example, for one of our last travels, and it was very cool. And while they failed traveling and got a hardship, they still enjoyed it because it gave them opportunities where everyone could shine, right? One time they had their cart stuck in a hole in the road, and the paladin used his athletics to push it out again, right? Because I asked him, what role do you want to roll? Why don't I roll athletics? The cart got stuck, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's a rainy day. Your cart is stuck in the mud. You try to push it out. You get some help from the others, and then we narrated that together. He and I did that together, and it was very fun because he got to build his paladin character out, because then it got to his helpful side, right? He's a helpful soul described by his player, and that was very fun. And then the hardship came of them, hey, the next spell you cast is wild magic. Now, just at random, that's a hardship, and that has impact on the game. That influences the game in an impactful way, and not just, okay, cool, you're there, but you don't feel great. That's boring. And those hardships and windfalls Matt and Fernando made are very great. So if people haven't, please check out Campfire. If we ever get to travel on Titan's Call, Niels, we're also gonna use it because it's very easy and very great to just utilize.
I'm looking forward to it. And I think we will use that.
Yeah.
Most certainly.
Maybe. I don't know.
So yeah, let's talk about a bit more about the things you can do to make travel more interesting, more intriguing. Do you have any specifics that you usually do?
Well, I use Campfire, and I make my travel interesting by using it to build my world, showcase my world to my players, and all of that. But, for example, I'm a big advocate against random encounter tables.
Same.
I know people love them for very good reasons, that they help you easily build your world with some encounter tables and make it very easy for you to say, okay, these 12 types of monsters are in this area, which one of my players gonna fight? I understand the benefits of it, but I just don't vibe with them at all. And that's okay. And right, what I do is, for travel, I kind of make every day count, even though we don't play every day out with Campfire, for example, right? I'm always coming back to that. I make the days count. I tell my players how long the journey's gonna be, and that time will have an impact. And then I, for example, think to myself, okay, out of those many days, for example, how often are they gonna sleep on the road and not in the tavern or something? How many of those days are gonna be bad weather, for example, which could be very interesting as well. And all of these things kind of influence how I make the travel interesting by making the days count without actually going through the slog of playing every single day. Making short notes for, okay, the travel is 9 days long. It's gonna rain 2 of those 9 days. Those 2 days are gonna be shit for my players. And then if my players say, okay, cool, I want to roll an athletics check to get the card moving again. Cool, that's one of the rainy days. Boom, period. Works perfectly.
Yeah, that's the way I do it as well, or at least sometimes. And I get the idea for random encounters, and I kind of use them, but not really. I look at the random encounters and make them not so random anymore.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of looking at what the table gives me if I'm playing a sort of module or predetermined campaign setting. I look at the tables, what they give me, and then fit those towards the campaign, that they kind of give some sort of, or mirror the themes of the campaign, or give some major or important information, or look at it and kind of fit it towards the campaign so it fits the vibe, fits the theme, and makes sense that they would be there rather than just being, the monsters live in that area. Have them have an impact on the story itself, because if they don't, I am not a big fan of using that. Just to throw some hit points at the party, that's not something I like to do.
Yeah, I always think when people use random encounters, I'm not saying that that's actually what they do. It's kind of that they don't like traveling, which is understandable. It's okay to not like travel, but the story doesn't stop at place A and continues at place B. The traveling is part of the story, right? A lot of people always say, forge your stories while in play. And that's totally true. The characters should forge their own path, their own story. They should develop in the game, right? That's a lot where the fun lies of these games. And you can't take travel out of the equation there. If your players are traveling, you can't just say that is not part of the story anymore. I'm not saying you can't not skip travel, because what I want to say very badly is it's totally fine to skip travel, especially if it's a travel back, right? If you travel somewhere and travel the same road back, you don't have to play that out. Just say your players get there, cut off the time they needed to get there, and be done with it. It's so boring for players to travel all the time, especially if they know the route, especially if it's a frequently traveled route. Well-paved roads won't have a lot of encounters of spiders on them. If they would, why aren't there any guards or military taking care of it?
Exactly.
These are well-paved roads, and like Neil said at the beginning, well-paved road probably means a lot of commerce, probably means a lot of trade. These roads are unsafe. Why the fuck aren't they? And that's the thing, especially if your players know the travel route or the characters know the travel route and the travel isn't supposed to be interesting, then don't try to let it take time. Then skip it, because it's totally okay. I often skip travels where I think I don't have anything really in my mind for this. I don't want to take up time with this, so let's just skip to the place where we want to be and get on with it. The travel, however, still happened. It still happened. And if your players are traveling for 9 days and you skip those 9 days, those 9 days might have never happened happened at the table, but they happened in the game. They happened in the story. So if your players are 9 days around a campfire, right? One of my big pet peeves is when my players say we set up camp, and I say, cool, you set up camp. Now you're all sitting around the campfire, and none of them start talking, right? Right? Your characters are probably talking right now. And players say, maybe, yeah, okay, yeah, you're probably right. And I'm like, well, do you want to role play the talk? And then they say no. And then I say, okay, cool, that's fine. Just say that and we go to long rest and, I don't know, watch order.
Yeah.
But obviously they're going to talk. They're not going to stare at each other for 9 days around the campfire. That's just not how these group dynamics work. And that talk still happens. So there's probably happened some bonding, maybe some dangers they faced. And those things still happened. And you can't neglect that they happened. You can't say they are not interesting to the story you actually want to tell, and you skip it to the enjoyment of the table, but they still happened. And you need to have that in mind.
Yeah. In general, travel can give awesome and interesting roleplay opportunities to your players to further develop their characters by encountering a special monster that is linked to some sort of story part or backstory element from one of the players. No one may have seen that monster, but one player remembers it as clear as day. And then they can later talk about that. And it just can give so many awesome moments to the party to bond over, to develop their characters and all of that. I'm repeating myself, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just a good opportunity.
I 100% agree, right? One thing I wanted to touch on as well is the video game parallels of travel in TTRPGs. Because there are different modes of travel in games, right? We have horseback, we have by cart, we have by foot, we have by ship, we have by whatever means of travel, flying airships, flying carpets, and maybe teleportation as well. And now TTRPGs are always kind of open world. They've always been, right? You might have your players streamlined or railroaded along a track, but the world is still more expansive than it actually is, right? You make the world big. You make your worlds. And if your players can actually travel the world or not isn't really necessary, but most people always portray their worlds as the big, expansive, lore-rich, and different places and all of that stuff, right? And it's never just, okay, you have only this road, you can only go this road, because that's boring, right? Obviously, they would look to the right and left and want to know what's left and right of them, even though they're not going to go there, it's still there. Kind of the same with video games. Video games haven't always been open world, because video games are limited by the technology they are used with, right? The biggest supercomputer we humans have ever found is the human brain. We are using the biggest supercomputer to play D&D and other TTRPGs every single time. Obviously, that computer has a lot more processing power than any computer we use to play video games. So video games are limited by the technology they are on. So obviously, they weren't open world all the time. But especially with open world games becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in the last 10, 15 years, I don't know, the newest Far Cry. Some people say that's one of the biggest maps ever created for video games. And that's very cool. I love big open world video games because they allow me a lot of stuff to do. But do you know what I need to do the stuff? Travel. I need to get from point A, where I am right now, to the point B, where I want to go. One thing about travel is, in video games, it's when you play a video game, and I know you also play these games, like Witcher 3, for example, is also a great example of this, but you also play these games, and you need to travel from your point A to point B, and it would take you 20 minutes to go from those places. What do you do? How do you get from point A to point B?
Either just use the fastest mode of transportation to rush there, or visit every minor thing that there is towards
along the path, right?
Yeah. And then maybe branching out even from these, you visit a small thing, some sort of point of interest, and then you see in your peripheral, a long ways off from the road where you need to go, another point of interest. And then you travel there. And then you kind of branch out everywhere until you finally arrive where you wanted to at the beginning.
And then it's 5 hours later and you spend your whole day playing video games.
Exactly.
And right, those are two ways to do it, actually. There is no in between those two ways. Either you use the fastest way of travel there, ignore everything that's on the path there, or you explore basically everything that's on the path.
Yeah.
Or at least you check it out and say, okay, I'm going to do that later. But you still explore the world that way.
Yeah.
And right, video game developers know that. They know their fans, when they want to go from A to B, they want to either go there by exploring. That's why there's a lot of stuff to explore. Or they want to use the fastest way possible. And how did they solve the problem of people wanting to go to a place as fast as possible, Niels?
When you once were there through fast traveling.
Yeah, some games don't even need you to discover fast travel points.
Yeah,
you just
true.
can travel there, right? And that that's a thing. Fast traveling ignores all of what we talked about so far because you ignore everything about the world. You ignore everything that's around you to just get from point A to point B. While that is a very acceptable way to do it, it takes so much of the experience of an open world away if you have the option to fast travel. Because obviously we're gonna use fast travel at some point. Everyone's gonna be bored enough of the world around them right now that they're just gonna fast travel where they want to be.
Yeah, I usually handle it the way that you can fast travel along roads they've already traveled upon. When they move from city A to city B and want to go back through the same way, I just use the fast travel method, basically.
Yeah, it's just
but if they want to go on another route, then we can play that.
But the thing for that is, for example, when I think of The Witcher again, and I went to, I don't know, Novigrad and went there, and then I traveled out again. There are so many encounters, so many bits and bobs, 1 or 2 side quests I completely would have missed if I just fast traveled back. And that's one of the beauties of some of these open world video games. The worlds are so specially and intricately designed to draw you in to play, to draw you in to explore the world, to draw you in to find new interesting things, to do that one combat encounter on the left or whatever. And I think there are some parallels to TTRPGs, while there are also some clear things that you need to avoid completely. For example, TTRPGs aren't made like video games. Quests don't wait for you.
Yeah.
So if your players have a time limit to go to a certain place to finish a quest there and go exploring and go over time, basically, that quest needs to fail or it needs to end. The players missed the opportunity. Games don't do that because it's just bad if the game tells you, well, sucks to be you, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you for exploring our world. We didn't want you to. No one's gonna do that because that's a surefire way to never get these people play your games again.
Exactly.
And while, yes, there are actually some games that did that. Pathfinder Kingmaker comes to mind instantly. If you don't reach a certain destination by a certain amount of time, the game is just over because you lost the race to get the kingdom first. And they give you enough time to do it, but there is still a time limit. And I heard people actually missing that time limit and never playing the game because the game was just over and they had to play the first 20 hours of the game again.
Yeah,
I can see why it's not the best. I totally agree that the time limit there is completely bullshit. But I understand why they also put it in because they wanted to mimic the TTRPG experience. The world doesn't wait for you.
Yeah.
At least it doesn't do that off. Obviously, a lot of people, myself included, I know you included, Niels, even if you want to deny it, everyone has probably done it at least once. The danger waits for your players.
Of course.
But that's a topic for another episode, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Danger waiting for players. And that's okay. But you need to avoid that your players have infinite time to explore your world.
This definitely.
And what you can do is the fast travel method, right? You just appear there because we can skip the travel. But while video games actually teleport you to the place and don't make an explanation of how you traveled there, without teleportation magic, you can't do that in TTRPGs. You can't just tell your players you teleported there.
In TTRPGs, it's more like a time skip.
TTRPGs are immersive. TTRPGs are breathing and living, more or less. Video games are one step away from that, right?
Yeah.
Especially RPG video games are very close to TTRPG experiences, but they are definitely not a TTRPG experience. So you need to pay it. You can take a lot of influence from them, right? Fast travel where you have been already were. Fast travel to places so your players don't have to explore, but if they want to, they always can.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main takeaway. Have the options available to skip your travel, but if your players want to explore, or if you feel like exploring is a good thing here, then do it. Because it's gonna open up so much world building, so much opportunity, so much place to grow as characters or grow an understanding of the world and problems in it that you just shouldn't miss.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I forgot the whole discussion through, what can make travel very interesting is weather and geographical difficulties. Because different weather conditions force you to travel differently. You can't just walk normally and strolling around in a fucking snowstorm. That would lead to definitely difficulties on the later end then, losing your way or anything like that. This is one thing that is often overlooked because it has implications towards later stages of the game, or it can have.
How do you mean that?
For example, it might take them longer, or they need to think about a more creative way to find their way through to where they want to go. If they, for example, need to travel through a mountain and there is a road there, but a rockfall blocked that road off, how do they get around there? Do they climb? Do they look for another way? Do they remove the rocks or whatever? that's something some can keep in mind when they plan something travel-ish.
I feel like, right, one thing Abyssal Brews Campfire does very well for your travels if you use it is allow your players to shape the challenges they want to face, but also at the same time, aside from Campfire, you as the DM can make up your own challenges, especially if they are important to the story. If my players were chasing someone, more or less, or following someone, and they caught wind of it, so they blocked the road, so they made travel for my players harder, because they wanted to lose their pursuers, my players. And obviously that's going to introduce challenges my players are not allowed to influence from before they actually face them, right? Campfire is a lot of collaborative, and that's cool. That's super awesome. At the same time, I want to introduce a challenge that's going to mean my players have to face it, no matter what they say, or no matter what they want, because sometimes it's okay to put roadblocks in your player's path. Literally this time, and that's really one great way to make your travel more interesting as well, by introducing challenges at the right moments, right? Your players can make them using Campfire or whatever collaborative way you want to use travel for, but sometimes it's totally okay for your story's sake to block your player's path with your DM agency, basically, with you saying this would make sense for my villain to do this now, so they do it, so the villain does it, boom, happened. Players no need to face it, whatever that they means. It could be a random encounter, it could be, or not a random encounter, but it can be an encounter, it can be a roadblock, it can be misinformation that the players now need to travel somewhere else. The villain paid someone off at the village where the road forks, and the players ask which way did they go, and the one say, and he says left, even though he went right. That's one of the basics examples, but that's something that can happen. And your players then need to face these challenges. And yeah, that's another great way to make travel interesting. To conclude this episode, I kind of feel a lot of people always make travel less interesting as it can be, and then complain about travel not being interesting enough for them.
Yeah, and I think it is a huge load of work to make travel that level of interesting that most people want it to be.
It's a very low payoff for the amount of work you need to put in to make it interesting, right?
Exactly. But I think once you know what you're doing when you prep interesting travel, it becomes easier and easier, because you can go back to the things you already did and reuse them. Especially some encounters or merchants they meet along the way, or NPCs or whatever, or weather conditions, how you handle them. You don't have to prep them every time anew. You can reuse your old stuff.
Your old prep. You can use your old prep. And if you don't want to prepare travel a lot, there are great opportunities to either just skip travel entirely and let your players narrate something like, okay, you traveled, you were 9 days on the road. What did you do in those 9 days on the road? What was one of the big talking points for you at the campfire? And your players figure something out, and that's totally fine as well. Use Campfire by Abyssal Brews to make travel interesting and short, but you can also make it long and interesting. But the thing, right, as I said, it's a low payoff for a very huge impact most of the time, because it's travel. You want them from interesting point A to go to interesting point B. The path between those interesting points, when you look at it first glance, is kind of boring, but it doesn't have to be. You can make it an interesting part of the story, an interesting part connecting other interesting parts. But what I want to say with these two, when you have two interesting parts that you need to connect with travel, make the travel different from the interesting parts. Make it change up the game through people, through cultures, through locations, environment, weather, whatever, but making it interesting for your players to approach this travel as another point in their adventure and in their story that is different from the points it connects, is one of the best ways to get them not interested in travel, because you don't want your players too interested in travel, right? It's not about getting your players interested in travel, it's about making travel an experience and not just a drag. And this is what we talked about in this episode, how to make travel interesting and an experience instead of just a drag of rolling a few dice and just saying, okay, you skip it, which is fine, but you can make it an experience your players will enjoy. I think with that, Niels, if you don't have any other points you want to make in this episode, we are done for today.
I think we are. As usual, at the ending, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDMPod. You can visit our website at www.doubledm.com. You can even donate to us on Ko-fi if you would like so. And with that, have a great day. Thanks for listening. Hear you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, people. Bye-bye.